Seeing reality as it is, the Buddhist way of seeing life. There is something true about the way you meet the world, and most of us go a lifetime without fully seeing it. What you call reality has always arrived through your senses, through feeling, through perception. It has always arrived through a mind already shaping what it receives before you even know it. Modern brain research now offers a striking parallel. Every act of perception is shaped by an interplay between sensory signals and the mind's expectations. What reaches awareness has already been interpreted in the very process of arriving. But the Buddha's concern, 2,500 years ago, was not theory for its own sake. It was liberation. That is where this journey begins, with the ordinary act of perception, before it becomes belief, reaction, and suffering. Pay attention for a moment to what happens when you meet someone new. Before you have decided to form an opinion, before any conscious judgment takes shape, you already know something about them. They feel safe, or they feel slightly off. They feel familiar, or they feel like someone you should be careful with. Whatever the verdict is, it has already arrived. You did not look at them and then decide. The decision was already inside the looking. The same process is happening all day, in every direction. This activity is continuous, naming what appears, comparing it with memory, predicting what comes next, assigning meaning, attaching feeling, and it happens faster than ordinary awareness can follow. By the time an experience becomes conscious, it has already been shaped. The light has already been colored. The face has already been read. The sound has already been turned into a sentence. The body has already taken a position. We tend to imagine the mind as a kind of clear mirror, simply reflecting what is in front of it. A more accurate image may be this: the mind is a workshop that never closes. It is shaping, sorting, framing, every second you are awake, and continuing through your dreams. Sit with this for a moment. The mind is editing every experience before it becomes conscious. Whatever you call reality has always arrived through this editing. There is no version of it that has come to you any other way. Once this is seen, reality is no longer something met outside experience. It is met within the field of seeing, hearing, sensing, feeling, and thinking. The very field where suffering begins, and where freedom also becomes possible. In the age the Buddha lived in, this question about the nature of all things was not a private philosophical hobby. It was everywhere. Wandering teachers debated openly about what is real, what is unreal, what exists, what does not exist, whether there is one underlying substance or many, whether the world is eternal or whether it comes and goes. Questions about reality filled the public life of northern India in the 5th century BCE, the way questions about science, consciousness, and the universe fill public conversation today. In one of his discourses, recorded in the early collections as the Sabha Sutta, the Buddha addressed this question directly. What is the all? What is everything that can be spoken of? His answer turned the question itself around. Instead of proposing a grand metaphysical picture, he drew a careful boundary. The all, he said, is the eye and the forms it sees. It is the ear and the sounds it hears. It is the nose and what it smells, the tongue and what it tastes, the body and what it touches, and the mind and the thoughts and impressions that arise within it. This, he said, is the all. If anyone claims there is another all beyond these, beyond this field of experience, and is asked to point to the basis of that claim, they will not be able to. They will only be repeating words. It is essential to be clear about what this teaching is and what it is not. The Buddha was not denying the existence of an external world, and he was not asking anyone to believe that nothing exists beyond the mind. The careful point he was making is more practical. Whatever can be honestly investigated appears within experience. Whatever can be clung to, suffered from, released, or awakened through appears here. Anything beyond that field may be interesting to think about, but it cannot be the place where suffering is directly understood and released. So from this point forward in our conversation, when we use the word reality, we mean something specific. We mean the field of experience that is appearing right now, through the senses, through feeling, through thought. This is the only reality any of us directly meets. The world out there may or may not be exactly as we picture it. The Buddha leaves that question aside. He brings our attention back to what we can actually examine, which is the experience arising in this moment, and the way it gives rise to either freedom or suffering. Reality, in this practical sense, is not an abstract puzzle to solve from a distance. It is the living field in which contact, feeling, perception, craving, resistance, and release all take place. Suffering begins inside this field, through movements so fast and familiar that they usually pass unseen. Imagine a small, ordinary moment. You pick up your phone. You see that someone you love has read your message. They have not replied. Within seconds, something has happened inside you, and you are no longer simply standing there holding a phone. Watch what actually occurs, step by step, slowed down. First, there is the simple contact of the eye with the screen. Light enters. An image forms. Then the mind recognizes what is being seen, applies a label, gives it a context. Read, but not answered. Up to this point, nothing especially painful has happened. It is just information. But almost immediately, something else arises in the body. An unpleasant feeling, an unease, a tightening somewhere in the chest or the stomach. There is no story yet. Just a tone. And then, in the next fraction of a second, the mind reaches for this unpleasant tone and begins to build. Why isn't she answering? Did I say something wrong? Is something going on with him? Does he still care? Memory comes in. Imagined futures come in. And by now there is no longer just a phone in your hand. There is a private film, and the whole scene has become a story of being hurt, ignored, or abandoned. You cannot quite remember when the film began. The same event does not create the same world in everyone. One person sees the unread reply and feels only mild curiosity. Another feels panic. Another feels anger. Another feels shame. The screen is the same. The message is the same. But the conditions meeting that moment are not the same. Memory is different. History is different. Fear is different. Hope is different. The mind meets the present together with everything it has learned to expect. The Buddha described this pattern with remarkable clarity. In the teaching of dependent arising, he described the chain in its compressed form. Contact gives rise to feeling. Feeling gives rise to craving. Craving gives rise to clinging. Clinging gives rise to becoming, and to all the sorrow and grief and despair that follow. Contact, feeling, craving. Those three words reveal the central turning point where a plain moment begins to become a suffering one. It is worth pausing here to say carefully what the Buddha meant by feeling in this teaching. He was using the word in a sense quite different from how modern psychology often uses it. Jealousy, despair, rage, longing, those are complex emotional states built later in the chain. The Buddha was pointing to something more primitive and immediate, sitting underneath all of them. A bare tone, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, nothing more. But beneath the story, something deeper is happening. The mind is not only interpreting experience, it is trying to secure it. It wants the pleasant to stay. It wants the unpleasant to leave. It wants the uncertain to become certain. It wants the moving field of life to become something it can hold. This is why a simple feeling tone becomes craving. The feeling itself is innocent. The leaning is what changes everything. Pleasant becomes keep this. Unpleasant becomes remove this. Uncertain becomes solve this. And in that leaning, experience begins to tighten. Even the neutral tone matters. When experience is neither pleasant nor painful, the mind often calls it boring. The hand reaches for the phone. Attention looks for a problem. The mind searches for something to want, something to fear, something to become busy with. In this way, even neutrality can become a doorway into craving, because the stillness of the moment is not yet trusted. In another discourse, the Buddha described the same movement from another angle. Contact gives rise to feeling. What is felt is perceived. What is perceived is thought about. And what is thought about can spread outward into inner storytelling. That is the small phone moment, written in the language of 2,500 years ago. Now the most important point for us. Practice can enter anywhere along this chain, but the most accessible doorway is often the gap between feeling and craving. Before the unpleasant tone hardens into, I need this to be different. Before the body's tightness becomes a demand for an answer. Before the story gathers force. That is where awareness has the clearest opening. After that, the momentum grows quickly. Before you remember the river, you are already downstream. And here another important point comes into view. Stories being built is one layer of the problem. The deeper layer lies underneath. The story is taken as reality before it is recognized as a story. A feeling arises, and it is heard as a command. An unpleasant tone arises, and it becomes, something is wrong. A pleasant tone arises, and it becomes, this must stay. Uncertainty arises, and it becomes, I have to know. This is what ignorance means in the Buddhist sense. It is something much subtler than stupidity. It is the failure to see the conditions clearly enough while they are moving. To see things as they are is to see this movement clearly enough, while it is happening, that the chain no longer has to complete itself in the same old way. This is the deeper meaning of seeing reality as it has come to be. The Pali phrase for seeing as it is yathabhuta. It is a small word with a great deal of weight inside it. Yatha means as, or according to, or in the manner of. Bhuta is the past participle of the verb to become. So while yathabhuta is often translated as it is, or as it really is, it can also carry a more dynamic sense, as it has come to be, or according to the way it has become. The usual translation is not wrong. What this seeing recognizes, however, is that experience is in motion. Things arising according to their conditions. Things passing according to their conditions. The flow of becoming itself. This distinction matters because it helps clarify two places where practice can easily become unclear. The first place to clarify is the idea that there must be a pure reality somewhere beneath all our mental interpretations, waiting to be uncovered, and that the work of meditation is to peel back the layers until we touch it directly. It is a beautiful image, but within the early Buddhist framing we are following here, the emphasis is slightly different. There is no clean photograph of reality hidden under the dust of thought, no original picture that the mind has been obscuring. Perception was already shaped from the very first instant. The work of practice is to understand the conditioned process by which experience arises. A second place where practice can become unclear is the image of standing back as a detached observer, calmly watching emotions and thoughts and sensations pass by like clouds. This sounds wise, and observation is genuinely essential to the path. The difficulty begins when observation becomes another place to stand. A position forms. Here is awareness, over there is experience. From there, practice can become distant, dry, separated from life. What is being pointed to is something simpler, seeing experience clearly as it unfolds, without stepping outside it. The seeing the Buddha pointed to is not merely knowing that the mind constructs experience. That knowledge can become just another idea added to the pile. The seeing he pointed to is more alive than that. It is seeing the very process of construction as it happens. The arising, the passing, the way one condition gives rise to the next. Seen as a living fact, in the moment, while the mind is doing what minds do. And in that seeing, something else becomes visible. Even the feeling of standing apart and watching is part of the same unfolding. It depends on attention, memory, contact, perception, and subtle habits of holding. It arises, changes, and passes like everything else in the field. When this kind of attention deepens through practice, the three characteristics the Buddha pointed to stop being doctrines we are asked to believe in. They become simply what is being seen. Everything within experience is in motion, arising and passing, never staying. Nowhere within conditioned experience can the mind rest its weight permanently without creating friction. And nowhere in this whole flow is there a fixed center holding everything together from behind. When this seeing matures, something begins to change. The stories do not need to be destroyed. They simply lose some of their spell. The pleasant is still pleasant, but it no longer promises completion. The painful is still painful, but it no longer becomes the whole sky. The uncertain is still uncertain, but it no longer has to be solved before peace is possible. This kind of disenchantment is not indifference, and it is not withdrawal from life. It is an awakening from the spell that every feeling, every thought, every fear, every desire is telling the whole truth. Freedom, in this sense, takes on a different meaning. It becomes a release from being enchanted by experience, rather than a struggle to control it. If this is not lived, it remains only philosophy. Its meaning becomes real in the next ordinary moment. When the body tightens, when emotion rises, when the mind begins to move, and reality has to be met directly. If this seeing remains only an idea, it has not yet reached the places where suffering is actually built. It has to enter the ordinary moments where life presses on us. A difficult conversation, an unanswered message, a painful memory, a body that hurts, a sudden wave of anger, fear, sadness, or restlessness. And this is not easy. The body and mind move quickly. By the time you remember to look clearly, the body may already be tight. The breath may already be shallow. The face may already be tense. And the mind may already be moving toward defense, blame, control, or escape. Emotion does not wait for awareness to arrive. It enters through the body, gathers meaning, and begins to shape what you see before you fully realize what has happened. So seeing reality as it is does not begin by forcing yourself to be calm. It begins by admitting what is already here: heat in the body, tightness in the chest, pressure in the throat, the impulse to speak, the urge to withdraw, the need to know, fix, defend, or be understood. These are not failures of practice. They are the exact place where practice becomes real. In that moment, the important shift is simple, but difficult. Instead of being carried immediately into the reaction, attention turns toward the process itself. What is happening in the body? What is the mind trying to protect? What is it trying to hold, push away, or control? This is not analysis for its own sake. It is a way of seeing the conditions while they are still moving. When anger is present, for example, the difference is not between feeling anger and not feeling anger. The difference is between anger is here and I have become the anger. In the first, anger is part of experience. In the second, anger becomes the whole place from which life is being met. Seeing clearly does not remove the heat at once, but it prevents the heat from becoming the only truth in the room. The same is true with fear, sadness, longing, or anxiety. The point is not to push them away or dress them in spiritual language. The point is to meet them before they harden into a command. Fear may be asking for safety. Sadness may be asking to be felt. Anxiety may be asking for certainty where certainty is not yet possible. When this is seen, the emotion may still remain, but its authority begins to weaken. This is what it means to bring the teaching into life. The same people remain. The same unfinished problems remain. The same body, with its limits and weather, remains. But something in the way experience is met has changed. What once felt like an order can now be seen as a condition. What once filled the whole field can now be seen as a movement passing through it. And this recognition often comes late. The words may already have been spoken. The reaction may already have happened. The mind may already have been carried downstream. But the moment of noticing is not failure. It is the first moment the chain is seen again. Seeing becomes practice in this very ordinary way, not by making every reaction disappear, but by no longer believing every reaction completely. A difficult moment can remain difficult without becoming the whole of reality. A feeling can be felt without becoming the place from which everything is seen. This is how the Buddha's teaching leaves the level of words and becomes a way of meeting life. The Buddha never promised a simpler reality. He never taught that practice would make the world quiet. What he pointed to was a way of living inside reality with all of its complexity, no longer being dragged along by it like driftwood in a flooding river. That is the freedom he spoke of. Pain still comes. The mind still moves. The world still does what it does. And yet, within all of that, there can be a way of meeting what appears without being completely carried away by it. And it does not live somewhere far away. It begins in the next moment you open your eyes and look.